was put in the ground to clear the way for the sewer system. And in 1971, I remember that conflict. There was a lot of conflict. You see, the city of Ithaca was providing the water for the Heights, and at times, you know, the city draws water from 6 Mile Creek, and that creek level would become low during the summer, and so sometimes the water system wasn't all that functioning as well. So I remember Walter Schwan, I think maybe you remember his name, he was the town supervisor of Ithaca. He led the effort to develop the water system, which is now what they call the Bolton Point water system. So it's interesting because now, you know, the city is redoing its water system, and while that is happening, the Bolton Port water will go into the city system until that renovation is completed. So here's a plaque to Mayor Marcham about our hero on the mantle. This house that was Dorothy Cornell's was then acquired by the village of Cayuga Heights in when, Kate? 1969 was when this was purchased to be the village headquarters. Well, I guess finally I wanted to talk about, just read a little bit, and this is another very good book if you would like to acquire it. I wrote a shorter history of the Heights, and John Marcham wrote a history of the village from about 1950 onwards. And also, before Mayor Marcham died, he also wrote a complete, you know, a very long memoir about his years as mayor and what he was doing here. But this was his description of what he hoped the village would be. A residential village, a quiet village, a village that accepted a few service stores to meet the needs of villagers, a village with its own functioning fire department, a sewage disposal system, and with a full around-the-clock police department. And again, he retired from office in 1988 after seeing his vision fulfilled. He died on December 16, 1992, and then John wrote, just as the story of Cayuga Heights in the first half of the century is the story of Newman and Blood, so the second half is the story of Fred Marcham. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the development of Kendall at Ithaca, because that's the major development in this village. It's also helped you keep your tax rates low, because we pay, you know, Kendall pays quite a bit in taxes, not only to the village, but the town and the school district. In 1990, in the early 1990s, a group of Cornell people headed by Dale Corson, Keith Kennedy, and some others, Ruth DeWire, were looking forward and foreseeing a need for a retirement community within the village or within the area, let's just put it that way. And eventually they contacted the Kendall Corporation, that's Kendal, only one L. And the Kendall Corporation began investigations about coming to Ithaca. And I think many of you, like we did, we attended the weekly meetings, monthly meetings at NICEAG, where they were talking about their Kendall philosophy and, you know, what would happen in a Kendall community and so on like that, in an effort to get people. They had to have 126 contracts signed before construction could start. So Dan and I moved into Kendall in January of 1996. So we're the third longest living founders at Kendall. Now you're probably wondering what's happening there. We are adding 24 apartments. We're adding a whole new health wing, new health wings, and we're renovating some interior spaces of the building. We've already, if you've driven in the area, have relocated some of the parking garages. And what you will find when everything is done is that there will be a direct entrance from Trip Hammer Road into Kendall. So It's about a $40 million project, and we have at least I was watching yesterday in the snow, there must have been 10 bulldozers, earth movers, steam shovels working. It's all in the front area of Kendall. You're welcome to drive in. You can see through the fence, but not really too well. But that'll all be completed within 2 years. The occupancy at Kendall is 88% right now. We're shooting for 90. We have one half of the apartments, the 24 apartments, have been committed already. We have our bond rating with Standard & Poor's is BBB. We've kept that up. And so I think we're looking ahead to a really a good time at Kendall. I think everything is going to work out very well there. And we appreciate the fact that we're part of the village. We're so happy that you come there for elections. You're welcome to walk the grounds anytime you want to. So, and I'm going to finally just conclude this program with another quotation from this book by John Munchauer. It says, Cayuga Heights ends the century an upper middle class community, a village of educators, physicians, lawyers, business people, and other professionals. It boasts being the home of famous scientists, scholars, and authors, supported to the south by some of the brightest students in the country, whose youth and exuberance complement the population, and to the north by elders who add the wisdom of age. Cayuga Heights is ready to enter the next century with a powerhouse of talent. If its citizens remain involved in local affairs in the next century, as they have in the 20th, the future of the village will be bright. Thank you all very much. You're welcome to leave, because it's a Super Bowl and I'm snowing still. But if you have any comments or questions or anything, please offer them.
Questions?
Yeah.
Rhonda? Yeah, I have a question about the school. It started, then it stopped, and then it started again. Do you know when it was first constructed and anything about that?
The school opened in the 1920s. It was called the Hitchcock Hall. And you'll find actually on the website, you'll find a photograph of the old building, which had a lot of charm to it. Then, when was that? The 80s, early 80s. They closed a number of schools as the population was down, the financing was difficult. Luckily, they kept Cayuga High School, and so then it reopened about 8 years after being closed. But in the meantime, the residents of the Heights kept it going as a village center. So they had programs there and classes and so on like that. So the building was never really closed. It was always open. And that was the same time there was a Cayuga Heights newsletter. A lot going on during that time period, yeah. So now, what is it, the kids from West Hill come to that was part of it, was mixing up the school population. So the kids from West Hill are bused into Cayuga Heights. Yeah.
And all the way down Buttermilk, there's a strip that goes way down 13. Those kids also come
When they come.
up. And almost all the children in the village, the area behind us, the Williamsburg Park area to the east of Trip Hammer goes to Northeast School, but the rest of the village kids come to the elementary.
You know what I wanted to do also, let me give you a lot of names. I want to start with the architects in the village, the design houses that are in the village. And it's sort of like to 1970. I'm sure probably Bill Downing has designed some houses here, maybe one or two. I'm not sure. Anyway, so let's go. Clinton Vivian. He designed mainly, I'm not going to give you all the residents, but the main thing was he designed Clovermere, the first house that Jared Newman had on the property. And I also forgot to mention that, Newman's name is not in the village, but it is on the golf course downtown. Newman gave that property to the city of Ithaca many years ago. It was the pit, the ash pit for the city of Ithaca. And so he gave it, and then so there we have a Newman golf course. Other architects were Arthur Waltz and Norman Gibb. I mentioned Leroy Burnham, a professor at Cornell. J. Lakin Baldridge, he designed his own house, that's the president of Cornell, at 511 Cayuga Heights Road. But mainly he's known for the design of the Tompkins County Courthouse, that lovely, beautiful, colonial revival facade. Helen Vickard Young, I know she designed this house. She was never accredited as an architect. I don't know whether it's because of her being a woman or what, but anyway, I've seen her plans. She's designed 6 or 7 houses in Cayuga Heights, but and she was married to the Dean Young, who was the dean of the College of Architecture. Carl Tolman, of course, he's best known for the design of Ithaca College, but he designed several buildings in here, in the village. I mentioned Sherwood Holt, the designer of the Corners' first building. Some of the builders, I mentioned Andrew McPherson, but some of the other ones were Frank Henshaw, Jess Dahl. Jess Dahl was a neighbor of Baldridge on Cayuga Heights Road. I mentioned the Heasleys and Nick Hill. I don't know what his real name was. But anyway, he's responsible for these other buildings here at the Corners, as well as I mentioned, the house that we first lived in on Trip Hammer Lane. I think he built some of those. The landscape architects. I mentioned Harold Caparn. Herbert Blanche, B-L-A-N-C-H-E, was a Cornell professor, as was Leroy Burnham, who was also, as I mentioned, was a landscape architect as well as designing buildings. And I wanted to mention Carl Crandall. If you have a minute, here's his map of the town of the village of Cayuga Heights in 1960. Jack Rogers still lives today at Kendall. He's in his 90s, but he was the village engineer for 32 years. So those are the names of the people associated with the village that you'll come across. Also, the other thing you'll find in Newman's deeds, forgot to mention, you'll find out they'll say no piggeries allowed. The garages, I remember our friends, the Brumsteds who lived on White Park Road, their garage was way in the back, and it was unusable. It was a tiny building. But that was another thing in the deed about whether garages had to be put, back, yeah. Okay, P.S.
Any other questions?
Yeah, here's the hand.
You were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the village, but you didn't mention what we're actually celebrating. Was it the legal incorporation of the village?
You will hear about that. The next speaker is Fred Cowett. Is he here today? He's a village planning board chair and a horticulturalist. And Bea Seckley, I hope she'll be able to do it, is going to talk about the evolution of the government of Cayuga Heights. So you'll get into that at that time.
Don, I think it was the incorporation of the village. It was 1915. So it was when we gained our independence, and right in the middle.
When developers start communities like this or neighborhoods, they often include plans for something like a commercial center or a heart of the village or something like that. Were those ideas ever involved in these developers' thoughts about Cayuga Heights, or?
Yeah, now Newman always thought that this outskirts, this area of the property would become a commercial center, which it has been. Yeah, okay, yes.
So where can we get these books you were talking about?
All of them are available at the History Center. So yes, both of my own book and then this Towns and Tompkins are available there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
During the Depression, the state was buying up farms in some of the outlying towns and closing them down. And I've heard that some of those houses were actually moved to Cayuga Heights. Is that just a rumor, or do you know anything about that?
Okay. One was moved from Caroline to here. Is that what you're talking about? It was, come up with this name.
Was it dismantled or moved as a whole house?
Anyway, yes, it's owned by one of the Colberts now. It's a white colonial revival house. It's at the end of Highgate Road, right? In Remington?
That's a long move.
Yeah, so that's the only one I know of, just that one house. Anything else? Yeah.
Frank Lloyd Wright Associates, is it true that some of his associates built a couple of houses around here?
The only one I know of is the one that entrance to the Westview Apartments, off Triphammer. They say,
Yeah, but there's no record of it.
the other one that's a prairie style house was Henry Shaler Williams' house, that's now Acacia Fraternity. That's kind of a prairie style structure also. Yeah. Oh, anything else? Yeah.
Your history of Kendall was sweet, but I remember being here when Cornell University was proposing just filling that area with ticky-tacky little houses. The enthusiasm of the residents to prevent that from happening, so.
Well, it's interesting, I don't know if you all knew Dale Corson well. I didn't know him well, but we were members of this same group that met on Saturdays. I mean, he could come up with anything, and he knew everybody. And, he said, well, yeah, I remember this and I remember this. Dale Corson pulled out from his file a letter from the administration of Cornell offering a lot on which he could build a house, which is the Savage Farm. But that never took place because of the demand for building materials for other uses after World War II. So, well, I'm glad we have Kendall. I think it's anything else? Okay, well, listen, here's our committee, Karen and Randy.
Well, could I just,
They're collecting information, yeah.
I'm just curious, I think I learned probably from one of your books, there was a little more about Blood and Newman, and specifically, some questions of whether they arranged sweetheart deals. For example, when Newman was mayor of Ithaca, some of these arrangements with the water, and I think when Blood was on some planning commission was when, at the city's expense, Stewart Ave was continued to Cayuga Heights Road, and that seemed to benefit the owners of this association in a way which we might say is,
We don't do things like that anymore.
it's moved to all
Well,
the.
on the other hand, full of the conflict of interest, yes, and after that time, because of that, he resigned as mayor and was never.
So my question was really, so what ultimately became of Blood?
Blood died. No, some of the property, like that, the area of Cayuga Heights, Cayuga Park, that road, that area, Newman designated that for Blood, to develop that area. But they both died in the same year, one after the other. So, but it's really interesting. I mean, Newman just kept pushing, and Charles, his son, kept saying. There were these letters, Dad, please stop, please stop. He realized, that the indebtedness was bad. His father was older, and they're just, and Newman got involved in property in Florida. He was going to develop a big property in Florida. And anyway, that's what I'm saying, there's 40 boxes. And I've tried to pull out a lot of that stuff that was pertinent and put it in the book because to me it was just so personal to see this whole thing work,
It just didn't seem like this development was a big success for either of them. That
Oh,
was,
no, and bled him dry. I wasn't talking about bled him anyway. Bled him, yeah, no, bled him dry. But it's here. You know, I think the wonderful thing is, maybe correct me, but I don't know if any house has been torn down and another, you know, mega house or whatever you want to call it, like is happening in other areas. That's not happened in the village. I think that's wonderful.
that happened on Highland.
Was there one that
It
came
was
down?
one, but it was not an old, I think it was a small modern house
That's
that came down, and then a newer modern house
Yeah, okay.
right below the school. So thank you, Carol, for a fascinating talk. We have a little thank you gift for you to again thank our history committee and encourage you, if you haven't, to pick up one of the cards right here on the end of this table that will take you to the history website and the history project. And please, we hope that we'll have this turn out for each of our talks. On June 13th of this year, the Historic Ithaca will host its annual house tour in the village. We'll have 8 village homes on that self-guided walking, biking, driving tour that begins right here at Marcham Hall. We'll also, as part of our centennial celebration, have 2 exhibits on display here at Marcham Hall at that time. One will be of the drawings of longtime village resident and beloved Cornell professor Jack Lambert's drawings of village life over the decades. And another will be of the historic documents, maps, and photos from the village. In the end, we'll take the maps down that we have on display in here, so we'll have Jack Lambert's drawings up, and they'll remain the permanent display in this room. So we're really excited about that and grateful to his family for donating those to the village of Cayuga Heights. Let me see if there's anything else I should say. Those exhibits are being created by the 2 women I thanked at the beginning of our talk today, and I want to again thank Carol Schiffman and Randy Capex. And their cooperation with the Tompkins County Geographic Information Services, who is helping them to develop a downloadable app on your phone for a walking history tour of the village of Cayuga Heights. So that you can walk through the village and
10 different tours.
10 different tours.
Manhattan Project tour, Nabokov tour, we have 6 homes in the village, Nobel architecture tour, so many tours I can't even remember.
We should thank our good friends at the county IT department also. They told me when they agreed to do this, they thought it would take a few hours. Even though it's really turned out to be at least a couple of
but it's only
a lot of
across
effort.
residents.
They're sticking with us on it. We hope you'll come back on Thursday, February 26th, right here, again for the follow-up talk on the focus on the natural environment, where, as Carol mentioned, we'll have Fred Cowett, who's the current chair of our planning board. So thank you all for coming, and it was wonderful having you, and thank you so much, Carol, for
I want to thank
that
Wyatt. She's the technical guru.